Hi everyone, in this video we're going to be taking a look at paper 2 and just going through some key things for revision and really going to test your understanding of what you know regarding the paper so far. First thing I'd like you to do is look at the statements below and identify which ones you think are true and which ones you think are false regarding paper 2. So the first one says, you get extra time in paper 2 because there are two different texts to read. The next one says, you need to identify a language technique for question 2. For question 1, you need to write down 4 key details. Question 4 is where you compare the writer's viewpoints and perspectives. 40 marks are available for question 5. And finally, question 3 will focus only on text A. So if you want to pause the video here and take your time and work your way through it, please feel free to do so. We're now going to jump ahead and go through the answers. Class feedback. Check your understanding against the answers below. So if we have a look at the table then, we can see that the true answers are question 4 is where you compare the writer's viewpoints and perspectives. The next one is 40 marks are available for question 5. Question 3 will focus only on text A. And for question 1, you need to write down 4 key details. For the false ones then, we need to think about how do we actually know that these things are false. So for example, you get extra time in paper 2 because there are 2 texts to read. Although this would be really beneficial and helpful, unfortunately we only have the same amount of time that we have for paper 1, even though there's that extra information to go through. Straight away this is going to make paper 2 just that much more inconvenient, just a little bit harder for some of us when we go through it. And the final one, you need to identify a language technique for question 2. Now this is actually a common misconception. For question 2, you don't need to think about a language technique because this is just the summary question, so you don't need to worry about any of that until you get on to question 3. So by the end of the lesson, you'll be able to recall key details regarding paper 2, understand how to approach some of the key questions, and apply your understanding to respond to an exam style question. Now specifically within this lesson, we're going to look at question 1, question 2, and then question 5. So all of those will be things that hopefully you'll be able to attempt by the end of the lesson. Look at the images below and attempt the challenges that follow. So the first thing to think about would be, how much have cars changed since the 19th century? Now this is a really important thing to consider because again, whenever you're thinking about paper 2, you always have to think about the 19th century, but also the 21st century as well. So the topic we're looking at today is going to be based on cars, so think about how they've changed in the last 200 years. And then if you can stretch and challenge yourself, think about how has our viewpoints and perspectives changed towards these vehicles. Think about things like global warming, emissions, all those other kind of things, and even things like safety and other factors that might have changed over that time. Look at text A and be ready to respond to question 1. So as you might have guessed, the topic that we're focusing on today is going to be about transport. So in text A then, it says, the new self-driving Tesla is set to come out for general release in 2022, costing over £30,000. This new leap in electronic vehicles boasts a futuristic view of driving where passengers sit back, relax, and let the car do all the work for them. Despite the many advantages brought about by this new technology, experts are viewing this new advancement as the death of conventional driving as we know it. The latest model can go from 0 to 60 in an impressive 1.9 seconds, securing in itself the title of the world's fastest car. With stats such as this, it's hard not to be impressed. So much so that the current waiting list for one of these futuristic fantasies is expected to be 2 to 5 years' time. The autopilot feature allows drivers to escape from the burden of driving and reduces your workload as a driver. The vehicle is equipped with 8 state-of-the-art cameras to keep you and your loved ones safe while in motion. So what we're going to do now, we're going to jump ahead and we're going to see a typical question 1. Again, if you need the actual copy of the text or of the actual questions themselves on an actual document, please let me know and I'll make sure that's available to you as well. Look at lines 1 to 12 and identify the 4 correct statements. So again, this is a very typical layout that you get for question 2. The first one says, the self-driving Tesla will be available to buy in 2022. Secondly, we have the car will cost £30,000. This is seen as the end of normal driving. The car can go from 0 to 60 in under 2 seconds. Customers expect to wait 6 years before they can get their own car. The car is fitted with 9 state-of-the-art cameras. The self-driving car has been around for many years. And finally, the writer believes driving is an inconvenience. So typically within the exam board will allow you about 5 minutes to have a go at this question, have a think about the information that's there on the screen, and if you need to, do take it back and have a look at the text. But you really shouldn't be spending any more than 5 minutes on this question. We're now going to jump ahead and have a look at the answers, so if you need a bit more time, please feel free to pause the video here. Class feedback. Check your answers against the one from the mark scheme. So just a reminder then, for question 1, it's worth 4 marks. Should spend about 5 minutes on this question, and what we want to focus on is implicit and explicit information. So the first answer would be the self-driving Tesla will be available to buy in 2022. This is seen as the end of normal driving. Number 3, the car can go from 0 to 60 in under 2 seconds. So the key thing to think about when you are approaching question 1 is just make sure that you read it very carefully. So in the text it actually says that it can go from 0 to 60 in 1.9 seconds. Obviously if it's 0.9, that is still technically under 2 seconds. So they do try and catch you out there by having the wording very similar to what you'd assume would be the correct answer. And the final answer then, the writer believes driving is an inconvenience. And if you want to stretch and challenge yourself, try and think about what we've just read and try and consider what the writer's viewpoint is about. Now, although we don't really need to consider that for question 1, it will be really important when we look at our next lesson and start thinking about the bigger value questions such as question 4. So one of the common questions that we get asked as teachers is what order should you actually have a go at the questions in? So the first thing to think about is we're not going to think about question 5 first of all, because a lot of the time teachers tell you to have a go at question 5 first. Now that is a really good idea because a lot of the marks are available there, but if we just focus on section A for the time being, there is also a little bit of a logical way to approach those first 4 questions as well. So if you actually think about it, you can do question 1 and question 3 one after the other. And the reason why we can do that is because it actually limits the amount of reading that you have to do in one portion. So first thing to note about these questions is that both of these questions will be focused on text A. So you could have a go at question 1, which is worth 4 marks, and question 3 that's worth 12 marks, and have a good 16 marks available for you just from reading the one source. Both questions will specify the actual sections you need to focus on. So in theory, you don't even need to read the whole of source A. You just need to pay attention to where the questions are asking you to focus and make sure that that's where you're focusing on when you answer the question. Question 1 is about implicit and explicit information. So that is not just the obvious information, but it's also about reading between the lines. And for question 3, this is the one that's about the language techniques. Now, a lot of people get this one confused because on paper 1 is actually question 2. So as long as you know what you're going to face in the actual exam and you feel confident about the questions, any order will be fine. The main thing to think about is what order works for you. When we think about question 2 and question 4, both of these questions will ask you to refer to both source A and source B. Question 2 will ask you to write a summary. Question 4 requires you to identify the methods used. This is actually quite a tricky thing because when we actually think about the word method, a lot of students are unsure what we mean by this, but it's actually the same thing as techniques. So this could refer to not only as language techniques, but also structural techniques as well. And the final point then, question 4 will compare the writer's viewpoints and perspectives. So really doesn't really matter what order you go through the questions, as long as you are able to get all of them done in the time that you're allowed. Just try and think about playing around with it and just see if you can understand which order makes the best sense for yourself. Now what we're going to do is move on and think about question 2. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to watch the video clips that are available in the link and attempt the challenges that follow. So the first thing to think about when you're watching these is try and identify 2 or more differences between the 2 cars within the videos. Try and recall as many linking words to help summarise the 2 different viewpoints. And finally, complete the question 2 using the help sheet that's also going to be provided as well. So when you're thinking about this, remember it's the summary question. So what we need as well is thinking about some key quotations from the videos that you can use to actually help within your response as well. Class feedback. Check your response against the ones below. So what you're about to see, what we've got here is a typical response that you get for question 2. And it's laid out using a very familiar structure for most of you there. So you've got point. The car in source A has been designed to look like an aeroplane. Evidence. This can be seen in the quote. It only needs a pair of wings to be at home in the sky. And then we've got our explanation. This shows how the car was designed to look futuristic and more like an aircraft than a typical car you would get at the time. Now this by itself would not be enough for part of a response. What you need to do is make sure you're thinking about both of the sources, or both of the videos in this case, and make sure you're doing the final step, which is to link it. Now when we are doing a link, we're making sure we're using our linking words, so a word like however, on the other hand, or anything like that. It's going to help us draw a slight comparison. So what I'd like you to do now, I'd like to try and stretch and challenge yourself and just write the rest of the response for question 2. Again, if you're not too sure about how to do this, do check out the other videos and see if you can understand how the differences have been explained between the 2 different cars that are being talked about. Okay, so hopefully now question 2 is going to be making a little bit more sense for you. What we're going to do now is we're going to move on and have a look at question 5. So what I want you to do is have a look at the exam question and just attempt the challenges that follow. So the question says then, young people are dangerous when they first learn to drive. The legal age to drive should be extended to the age of 21. Write a letter to the Department of Transport to express your views on this statement. And as with any question 5, it's going to be worth 40 marks. So first thing to think about when you have a question like this is to identify the TAP of the exam question. If you're not too sure what we mean by that, we mean the topic, the audience, and the purpose. And this is just going to help you to break down the question and to really understand what it is specifically you need to be talking about. Secondly, I'd like you to have a go at a super challenge and recall the acronym needed for question 5. Now when we're talking about the acronym that we need for this question, we're talking about the acronym that will cover the kind of techniques that you're going to use in persuasive language. And finally, mega challenge, come up with 3 strong points to make a response to this question. So regardless of what the question will be for question 5, you want to make sure you've got an introduction, a conclusion, and 3 strong points. Class feedback. Check your understanding against the answers below. So think about the challenges that we thought about relating to the question 5. We're just going to go through them and make sure we're all on the same page before we make a start. So first thing, the challenge was, what is the TAP? Second challenge, the super challenge, is what is the acronym needed for question 5? And finally, list 3 ideas that you could use. Okay, so the first one then, for the TAP, the topic would be young drivers and dangerous driving. The audience would be the Department of Transport, and the purpose to express your own point of view. It's also important to note that the form we've been asked to write in is going to be a letter, so you have to make sure that you're following the convention set out by that. And when you think about the acronym that we need now for the super challenge, it is of course the DeForest techniques. So first of all, we mean direct address. Secondly, we mean alliteration. We have facts, opinions, rhetorical question, repetition, emotive language, statistics, and a triplet or a group of 3. Now, if you're not too sure what these words mean, do take the time to research them and look them up. These are all things that we've gone through before, so hopefully by now most of them should be fairly familiar for you. Now, when you're doing your question 5, it can be really difficult to come up with some really good ideas on the spot, and here are some typical ones you can use in your own writing. So first thing that I thought about was, rather than changing the age, think about making the test harder. So if they're saying that people who do drive cars at a young age are doing it in a dangerous way, maybe the fault lies in the actual test that they're sitting. The next one, young people are more cautious than some older people. There's certainly going to be an argument for that, especially when you think about people who might have eye problems or anything like that when they get on in years. And finally, support young people by teaching driving skills and safety while in school or in college. I mean, that's the kind of thing that they do in America. A lot of people start driving at the age of 15 over there. So why don't they have some kind of program, some kind of incentive to help teach about road safety over here in the UK? Look at the student response and attempt the challenges that follow. Dear Sir, the ability to drive is a basic right for all that dedicates their time, money and effort in learning and understanding how to drive properly. Teenagers are often responsible, so the idea of raising the age limit is just stupid. I mean, what kind of moron thought of that? If you really cared about young people's driving, you would make sure we learn how to drive sooner. Listen, mate, let me get straight to the point. You need to stop blaming young people for all the bad drivers out there. So what I'd like you to do now that we've gone through the response is just think about, first of all, has the response been written in the correct form for an email? Then the super challenge would be identify any positives or negative aspects of the response. Then the mega challenge, use this example to help plan and write your first response to this question. Now, I'm not expecting this to be perfect. As you can see from the example there, that is far from perfect. There is definitely some areas that needs to be improved, but it's all about having a go and having something to work with and build on when we come back and look at this in more detail. Exit ticket. Respond to the questions below to assess your learning from today's lesson. Number 1. Think about the questions we've covered today. Which one do you feel you need to revisit? So which one do you think that you might be a little bit unsure about still, and you feel like you need to spend some more time and revise that question in particular? Number 2, what structure do you use to answer question 2? The final question, what is the name of the acronym we need to use when answering question 5? If you need any additional support or help, the new videos will be added every single week. Alternatively, leave us a comment below, or you can also check out our partner channel Bookworm Teaching for more lessons as well. Thanks for listening, guys. Bye bye.